Rwanda reinvented, scarred by genocide, poverty, and chaos. The African nation has emerged from a failed state to break a cycle of despair and disease. But is the success story down to foreign aid and guilty consciences? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Darine Aboughaida. Well, it's a dark chapter in Rwanda's history. The 1994 genocide that killed up to 20% of the country's population. It also displaced 2 million of its people. Well, the violent episode took a heavy toll on the economy and the country's health service. But nearly 2 decades on, Rwanda is being hailed as a model for recovery and reinvention. It's also praised as a spectacular public health success story. And here's why. A study by health experts in the U.S. says that Rwanda has improved the quality of life in almost all walks of life. Take life expectancy, for example. 1 year after the genocide, it was just 30 years old. Latest figures show it has almost doubled to 59. By comparison, Ethiopia has an average life expectancy of 54. And in the conflict-stricken Democratic Republic of Congo, it's 49. While improving the plight of the poor, in 1994, 78% of the population in Rwanda lived below the poverty line. By 2010, that figure had dropped to 45%. And in the 5 years alone, between 2005 and 2010, 1 million Rwandans were lifted out of poverty. Well, Rwanda is winning the fight against infectious diseases as well, it seems. Deaths from HIV, TB, and malaria have all dropped by around 80% over the past 10 years. Rwanda has a rate of around 128 sufferers per 100,000 people of TB. In Ethiopia, that's close to 400 people. And in the DRC, the figure there is well over 500 for every 100,000 people. We do have analysis and comments from our guests in just a moment, but first, joining us via Skype from Rwanda's capital, Kigali, is the Minister of Health, Agnes Binagwaho. It's good to have you with us on Al Jazeera, Minister. So you heard me just reading off these figures on the improved health statistics over in Rwanda. What do you attribute the success to?
So, thank you for having me. The success, it's a country success. It's not the success of the health sector alone, because we have done it just because we have a good decentralization system. We have accountability of each and every leader at community level and at central level, and also because all our policy are driven by the needs of the poorest.
Okay.
Meaning we left nobody out of benefits.
All right. A very interesting point that you bring up, which I will come back to. But let me put this to you, because some say, in fact, that the high spending on healthcare in your country is thanks to foreign aid.
That's true. We are developing and we have partners. But we don't have more money from partners than other countries. So it's good to say and recognize the contribution of the global solidarity and now about other governments that are helping Rwanda and Africa in general to get out of poverty and of the vicious cycle of poverty and disease. But it's also, you have also to see that it's not more. And there was recently an article published in the BMG by an independent team that have shown that the number of lives saved in Rwanda per capita in general and by investment in health is higher than in other countries. So this is the true question. It's not what to have aid or not for Africa, but it's what you do with it.
Okay, but hang on. I just do want to focus on the aid for a moment, because a couple of months ago, some foreign countries, in fact, suspended aid to Rwanda, and that's because the UN accused Rwanda of backing M23 rebels in the DRC, as I'm sure you were very aware of that report. So the question is, if these countries suspend their aid indefinitely, if aid pulls out of Rwanda, would your health system collapse?
I don't think so, because we have built what has been built will not go. People trained will not disappear or vanished. And also, we need to see what it means, because in the health sector, there is no change for the time being, and the UK reverses decision. The report has been proved wrong, and we are not yet there. There are some countries that are withdraw the support. It's more because they have financial problem themselves, but and they take this situation to have to good look when they are taking decisions that are not necessary. And also, we can say that there are some partners that doesn't want necessarily Africa to get out of poverty for other reasons. They don't know our way to see things. The obligation partners have to fit in our plan, and that our plan is done from community to the top, but it's totally a national plan.
Okay, let's talk about the national plan. Let's talk about the national plan, and you brought this up a little earlier on. Now, there was another report, and this was released by the Hotel Rwanda Rusesabagina Foundation, and it was saying that there, in fact, is a growing gap between health care for urban and rural Rwandans, and that health care is not accessible to all Rwandans, and particularly the ones that are residing in the Hutu areas. What do you say to that?
So first of all, there is no Hutu areas in Rwanda. Secondly, this man is a man that has became celeb because of Hollywood, not because of the reality. He took money from people that were trying to escape genocide and didn't save them. So you should see who do the report. What is
let me ask you then, do all Rwandan citizens consistently have adequate access to health care and health resources in Rwanda?
It depends what we call adequate access. Last year, we had 98% of all Rwandan belonging to a health insurance. The majority of them, it's at community level. And don't believe that if in less than 18 years we have doubled the life expectancy, we did that only by tackling the cities. I think we should see who give an information and what is the objective of this information. Information or destroying. And you also, if you see the results, and we have neutral people who are doing assessment, like Macro from CDC, from Atlanta, who are doing the DHS every 5 years. And it showed that, on contrary, the discrepancy between urban area and rural area are diminishing, and this on really key indicators.
They are diminishing. You say they're diminishing, but how big a difference is there right now between access and treatment for those living in the rural areas and those living in the urban areas?
Example of HIV. Can I give you the example of people living with HIV/AIDS?
Go ahead.
We have now, for example, can I give you that? Or access to delivery in a health facility? So this shows that the difference between is more linked to education than the place you live. You get me properly. The more educated you are, the more you use health facilities. Now, with the program of education for all up to 18, this part of the discrepancy on access among Rwandan will disappear. But of course, it will take another 5 years. But for the moment, between 2000, 2005, 2010, this discrepancy has going diminishing. And the survey you have report on, pulling 1 million Rwandan out of poverty, the same survey showed that for all Rwandan, they can reach a health facility in less than 1 hour. And of course, we have more than 1 million people living in Kigali. So in rural area, the density is less. The number of health facilities is according population density not according this place or this place.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. That's the Minister of Health from Rwanda, Agnes Binagwaho, joining us from the capital, Kigali. Let's bring in our guests from Oslo. Salam Haile Mikhail, Program Coordinator for Care International in Norway. In Vienna, Patrick Noah, co-editor of the book Rwanda Fast Forward, looking at the country's prospects in the coming years. And Danielle Beswick, a lecturer and specialist on Rwanda at the University of Birmingham. It's good to have you with us on Al Jazeera, and I'm sure you all heard that discussion I was just having with the Minister of Health from Rwanda. Salam, I'll come over to you first and just ask you the same question that I asked her in the beginning. What do you attribute the improved figures in Rwanda when it comes to the health?
I think first and foremost, it's important for me to mention that I come from an organization, CARE, that works with women's empowerment, and we work with women's empowerment issues because we believe that it's the prerequisite that needs to be in place for development and economic equality to happen. And we believe that Rwanda actually has the ingredients in place. It's the most one of the most progressive countries in this context. It's got very gender-friendly, women's empowerment-friendly policies in place. And not only is it in rhetorics, but it's really, one can see even to the grassroots level that the mechanisms and the machineries are in place. And all of this, I think, are part of what is fueling the economic development of the country. So I would just say that they are on the right track.
Patrick?
It's a visionary country.
Patrick, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. It almost feels like time in Rwanda has accelerated, and the achievements that have been achieved across, or that have been met across a number of the health indicators that have been discussed a few moments ago, I think are quite unique and are down to very strong determination at the highest level that has filtered through the entire population of Rwanda. So the achievements, I think, are nothing short of extraordinary.
Danielle, do you share that view? Achievements are extraordinary over in Rwanda, and is the government, should the government be credited for the development over in Rwanda, or is it thanks to foreign aid, as some people seem to say?
I think the Rwandan government should be credited for the achievements that it's managed to make in a relatively short period of time, and particularly when you're referencing the baseline of the 1994 genocide. But at the same time, I'm not convinced it's an either-or situation where we should say either the Rwandan government should take all the credit or the donors should take all the credit. I think what Rwanda's been able to do is to develop quite an innovative partnership with the donors based on a kind of ownership which we don't normally see amongst African states. So the Rwandan government basically says to the donors, we know what we want to do in terms of health, in terms of development. What we want from you is to fund our ideas rather than you funding specific projects. So I think Rwanda as a government has quite a unique approach, or a very strongly nationally owned approach to development, which is something we don't often see.
Danielle, you mentioned the genocide there. Let's just take a look at that a little bit closely, because Rwanda's recent history comes after one of its lowest, in fact, and that is the genocide of 1994. An estimated 800,000 Rwandans were killed in the space of just 100 days between April and June of 1994. Most of the dead were minority Tutsis. Those responsible were mainly majority Hutus. Well, the violence was sparked by the death of Rwanda's Hutu president, Juvenal Habyarimana, and Tutsis were blamed for shooting down his plane. And so the retribution began. The Tutsi-led Rwandan Patriotic Front eventually captured the capital, Kigali, sending an estimated 2 million Hutus fleeing to Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo. Salam, over to you. How much of a factor is the genocide in this improved health sector over in Rwanda? Because some are saying that Rwanda built this new health system, and that's thanks to the influx of healthy aid money that we've been talking about from wealthy countries, because these countries, in fact, feel guilty about what happened during the genocide. Is guilt a factor here?
I think the international community, as it would have been in any other setting, has a shared responsibility of avoiding things like this from happening. So there is an accountability factor there. But I would say, like I said earlier on, the vision and the framework first needs to be in place, even for aid to make sense and to make any kind of sensible contribution. And the reason why in Rwanda, Rwanda is the economic situation and the starting point for Rwanda, it was quite at a very backstage when one compares it to the other countries in the neighboring areas. So for the country to reach the level at which it's at this point in time, I think what has contributed for that, I would say it's the vision, the shared vision actually, not just at the top leadership level, but it's a vision that's shared by even the grassroots communities that we work closely with the women. And having all these ingredients in place has been the major factor. That's how we in CARE see this.
Patrick, Paul Kagame and the government are hailed as a shining example for Africa, and especially when it comes to the health sector, as we're talking about. But at the same time, Patrick, there are many strong criticisms about the government. I mean, human rights groups are saying that the regime intensifies its crackdown on its critics, it arrests them, it intimidates opposition politicians and journalists. Should donors then consider more carefully how they spend their money when it comes to Rwanda?
Well, I think it's hard to say for me whether donors should consider some of the facts that you have mentioned right now in their decision-making around withdrawing or providing further aid. But I think one of the really important things that you've mentioned a few moments ago was this matter of this business of guilt. And I think, in addition to what Salama has said around the very strong grassroots organizations and people within Rwanda who have been able to materialize, or through whom some of these health gains have been materialized, I would stress from our own assessment that guilt of the international community has played, I think, a significant role in a number of these things. Of course, one is to provide support and aid, but I think on the other side also is to perhaps not shine such a strong light on some of the more challenging or more difficult situations that have presented themselves in Rwanda over the last several years. And so I think it is fair to say that under some circumstances or in some cases, perhaps Rwanda hasn't been exposed to the same scrutiny as some of the other countries have. And so there has been somewhat more freedom to move than would have been apparent in other countries, I would say.
Danielle, what do you think of that? Is guilt playing a factor here?
I think guilt is part of this discussion around why Rwanda attracts so much aid, and also why it has such a free hand, as Patrick's just alluded to. But at the same time, I think there has to be some recognition of the fact that donors don't just feel guilty and therefore they pour money into Rwanda. I think they also recognise that the Rwandan government has a strong vision for development, as your first contributor mentioned, and also that they want to contribute to that, and it's a shared vision between the donors and the Rwandan government. That's not to say that there aren't problems and challenges with that very strong, single-minded government model, but we can obviously talk about that if that's something you would like to discuss further.
Well, a contrasting picture is painted about healthcare in Rwanda, and I put this to the Minister of Health just at the beginning of our program. This report was published by the foundation set up by Paul Rusesabagina. He was the real-life hero of the acclaimed film Hotel Rwanda, who saved the lives of more than 1,200 people during the Rwandan genocide. And that report points to limited health care for people living in the countryside, with the vast majority of health professionals based in urban areas. It accuses President Paul Kagame of planning to introduce a sterilization program to reduce the number of poor Hutus, and it talks of widespread torture, starvation and suffocation in prisons with little medical attention. Selma, I'll just come over to you and get your reaction on this report, because you speak of the vision of the government, but this report certainly highlights a very different picture, and also says that it's used, Rwandan healthcare in fact is used as a political tool to further the goals of Kagame's regime.
Well, I really think it depends where one finds their information from regarding this. It's quite a mixed information that's coming out about Rwanda. That's a fact. But I think I can only say from what we're, as a humanitarian organization, very much visible and active on the ground level, what we're able to see happening. And it actually is a very inclusive development that's in place in Rwanda. there is a very strong culture of voluntarism where people actually feel as if they have the obligation to contribute. And there is this traditional institutions that are not disappearing in the country, but are being used very strategically by the government to make sure that people are together in this development, that their opinions are actually, that there is room for them to reflect their opinions, and that even there is the practice of being evaluated by people's opinion. And it's rarely in African setting that this happens, that there is a performance, a contract that people have to meet up to, and then if they don't deliver, that they will have to give up their positions. And this is very inclusive, very open, and so when one looks at what's happening on the ground level, what one sees is very much promising, very much inclusive, and I mean, like, people always have to remember where the country is coming from.
Right.
That baseline, I think we cannot dismiss it. We cannot take that lightly. So,
right, Danielle, your response to the report?
We have yeah.
Well, my response to the report would basically be to put it into a broader context of a wider process of instrumentalization of certain aspects of Rwanda's policy. So, for example, there's a lot of lauding of the fact there are a lot of women in parliament, which is a fantastic achievement. Rwanda has the highest proportion of female parliamentarians anywhere in the world. But at the same time, that's been criticised as a way for the RPF, Kagame's ruling party, to hide their dominance of the political sphere by saying these are women rather than these are RPF members. And I think in some ways the criticism that's being made of the health policy is quite similar, that it's used as a tool for managing and for trying to modernise society in a way that people aren't necessarily comfortable with. So I think if you put it in that broader context of a very strong-minded, very developmental, but at the same time very committed government that doesn't like people to say no and doesn't really like to take on board criticism, it becomes quite a dangerous mix. That's the challenge of Rwanda, really, for the donors.
And Patrick?
Yes, let me also offer some thoughts here. We've mentioned now this Vision 2020 that has been developed for Rwanda. And the vision, of course, is, as we're hearing, a very good thing because it hones people's effort and there is a very strong response to it. But I think it's also a double-edged sword. So while it cuts in the positive way, it can also cut in another way by some people have compared it to a speeding train. This is the vision, this is the speeding train on which Rwanda is traveling towards the future. And first, there's no way of stopping it. And second, either you're on the train or you're not. And so what we have noticed when we put together our book, Rwanda Fast Forward, was that people have a range of different views, opinions and perceptions about where the country might be going. But very often or very frequently feel that they're unable and feel that they would be in harm's way if they expressed an opinion or a view or a perception that very strongly deviates from this national vision. The other thing, of course,
Patrick,
that I want to just quickly reflect on is what Salima has mentioned, is that there is very strong voluntarism where people feel obligated to contribute. So this is quite an interesting dichotomy to me. Either it's voluntary or you're obligated to contribute to something. And I think that, in a sense, summarizes some of the conundrums that are being felt right now in terms of the development of the country.
Well, let's just stay with the development for 1 second. And the final question to you, Patrick. Can Rwanda's story be a model for other countries in Africa?
You know, it's very hard to compare one country to another, and as the recent history of Rwanda has shown, it's very difficult to compare Rwanda of today to the Rwanda of 20 years ago. Of course, there are lessons to be learned that come out of Rwanda. There are lessons to be learned in terms of its strong leadership. But at the same time, it's very hard to tell where countries are going, what their priorities ought to be, and who contributes to shaping and forming those priorities. So, yes, I think there are lessons, but all the lessons need to be taken with a pinch of salt, because to every success story, there's also elements that we need to look at, I think, extremely critically. And this is not to be negative in any way, but we just need to have a very critical eye to how things are being done, how inclusive they are, how much of leeway there is for everyone to really express quite freely what they prefer to do or rather not do.
Thank you to all my guests, Salam Haile Makhail, Patrick Noack and Danielle Beswick. And joining us a little earlier, we had Rwanda's Minister of Health, Agnes Binagwahu. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. You can always send us your feedback. Email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks for watching, and from me and the whole team, goodbye for now.